going to stand up for my opening statement, and then I'll sit down for the rest. Thank you so much for being here tonight. My name's Jimmy Halliburton. I'm running for Boise City Council seat 3, and I'm running for that seat because I absolutely love this community. I was born and raised here. I grew up in a house on Old Highway 55, a house that my grandpa built in the 1950s, and I had an absolutely incredible childhood. I remember riding my bicycle all over this town, getting lost in the Boise foothills, doing all of the things that kids should be able to do in this city. And I absolutely love Boise for what it is today. Just a few days ago, I got to celebrate 12 years as the Boise Bicycle Project's founder and executive director. 12 years of working with people from all over the city, from all walks of life, from all backgrounds, from all income levels, in every single neighborhood. And together we've made it possible to distribute over 16,000 bicycles to our kids and our families who need them the most. I've had the opportunity to work with everybody to make our streets safer for Idaho families, to work with neighborhood associations, to pass laws, to pass ordinances, to write city code. And I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of you in pulling over 10,000 pounds of goat heads in this town in the last couple of years as well. And I absolutely love Boise for the city that it can be. And that really is why I'm running. Right now we're facing a lot of different obstacles, and those obstacles can be a little bit scary, but we are living in a time where we have a wide open window to create the city that we want it to be. And we've done those things, we've done hard things. Just 4 years ago, almost on this exact same day, a little kid in this neighborhood, Max Wyatt, was hit while he was riding his bicycle with his father. And he's doing great today, he's bouncing off all the walls like a little kid should be doing. But when he was in the hospital, I talked to his family, and I said, I will do something to make our streets safer by the time that Max comes back and he's riding his bicycle again. And it was with you that we were able to talk to the governor to get mandatory questions put on the statewide driver's ed exam and do hard things. I believe this is a community that can do hard things, and I'm excited to do those things with you. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Jimmy. Stayed on time. That's a great start. Meredith.
Hi, my name is Meredith Stead, and I was the marketing director at Valley, Idaho for about 5 years, and now work in a similar capacity for the Boise Valley Economic Partnership, where I help businesses make the decision to move their jobs to the Boise metro area. I've always been somebody who's built community, so I joined the Boise State Public Radio Community Advisory Board. I joined the Funzi Board of Directors. I joined Leadership Boise, of which I was elected by my peers to serve as their president. And, but still I wanted to find a focused way to have a really positive impact on my community. So I was ultimately appointed to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And I have loved that process of working with our residents to navigate through that really complicated process. And I think probably like many of you, it's been very frustrating for me at times because we make decisions at Planning and Zoning based on the development code. And louder? Okay, is this better? Okay, so I, on planning and zoning, I've been very frustrated, probably like many of you, because we make our decisions based on the development code and not always on what's the best interest for the long-term vision of the city. So ultimately, that's why I chose to run for city council, because I want to make sure that as we grow, I'm at the table to make sure that we're keeping up with our infrastructure needs, protecting our natural resources, and really tackling some of those tough issues like affordable housing and public transportation. I still have a few seconds. I wonder if I should even go back and, okay, I was the marketing director at Valley, Idaho for about 5 years and now work for Boise Valley Economic Partnership, where I help businesses make the decision to relocate to the Boise metro region. And I think I'm about out of time now, but oh, don't worry, I'll catch you guys up as we go along.
Yes, if you're having problems hearing, thank you. Yeah, if you can't hear, just yell out, and we'll get the microphone either closer to the candidates, or we'll have our audio person in the back crank their microphone, but let us know. And I forgot to mention, obviously, keep your phones down. I haven't heard one phone ring. That's fantastic. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we have some questions for the two of you that have been submitted from the audience. Very smart audience, I might add. So here's the first question for you. We'll just keep it in order, so Jim, you can go first, and then Meredith. Everyone states the need for increased public transportation. The city budget is limited, so what would you do to put more money, would you out to put more money into the transportation to make it easier for people to get around through public transportation in our city?
I love that question. I'm a big transportation person, and all the people that I work with at the Boise Bicycle Project, all these families, they face different transportation barriers. A lot of the kids come from one car and no car families, and public transportation is a huge thing for so many of those people and for so many of our aging people in the community as well. Some people may or may not know, but our state doesn't provide statewide funding for public transportation, so it's really up to our cities to figure out ways to solve these problems. And in the Treasure Valley, the city of Boise actually subsidizes public transportation for most of our surrounding cities as well, and that's Valley Regional Transit who runs that. I've sat on different committees for Valley Regional Transit over the years, and I currently sit on one called Neighbors United that really focuses on making sure that we have public transportation available to the refugee community. And it's a huge, huge issue that affects so many people. While the city of Boise does subsidize those programs, I don't think that there is something that is better for the city to be investing in. We have to make sure that people are connected to opportunities in their communities to grow. And I do think that there are lots of things that we can do to partner in the public, private, and nonprofit sector to overcome a lot of those funding barriers. One of the things that I would like to see is a way to tie development into funding for public transportation stops. So if somebody in Which one are we, 15?
15 seconds.
All right, got the stop sign, 15 more seconds. If we can tie development into investment in our public transportation stops and reduce funding from the budget for BRT to increase the stops, right now we have best-in-class stops that are really effective on Vista, State Street, and Fairview. We need to expand those into other areas where people are close to job centers, Overland, Orchard, Broadway, all these other areas where we know that people need to go.
All right, Meredith, do you want the question again? Or okay, this is about transportation in our city, the need for of it. What would you limit? The city budget is limited, so what would you cut to put more money into transportation to make it easier for all of us to get around?
Okay, that is a great question. I think that transportation really needs to be a valley-wide solution, and right now I respect the city of Boise for the investment that they have made in our bus system. They're committed to $8 million a year, but the next biggest funder down the valley is the city of Nampa at less than $100,000 a year. So I see the solution really of forming partnerships with those other municipalities and really working with them to increase their budgets to that similar 5% buy-in so that we can expand on what we have already existing, so that we're expanding that bus system for more routes and more stops and more times. But right now I know the city of Meridian, 80% of their workforce commutes outside of the city of Meridian for work every day. And I know that if I was that leadership, I would want those people home as soon as possible to be spending money in my markets and my restaurants and not waiting out the commute in downtown Boise. I think Meridian's ready for that conversation now, and it's about a valley-wide investment. And with my experience with Boise Valley Economic Partnership, I have those relationships already with each of those municipalities, and I would look forward to working with them to get them committed to that 5%, so that we're all equally invested in expanding upon what we have, and continued pedestrian and bicycle connectivity, of course, also, but really investing in that the bus system that we have.
Okay, our next question, again from the audience. What is a fair, Jimmy, we'll keep rotating, what is a fair and reasonable tax burden to expect for any individual property owner? Specific dollar amount, range, or percent of income?
You want me to go first again?
Yeah.
So one of the things I think that we have to be really careful of is any city council candidate promising that they're going to do anything to change what is going on with our property taxes. We know that we have a state that does not properly fund our education department, and that's where most of our property taxes are going to every single year. And we know that we've got a state that is making it so that we can't remove the cap for our folks who are really experiencing problems of being able to afford to stay in their houses. And I think that is our biggest issue here. We have people in the community living in affordable neighborhoods, and one of the biggest things that we need to do with our affordable housing is to make sure that we preserve those affordable neighborhoods. And in order to do that, we need to protect people from these property tax increases. And we have to do that by working with our municipalities, with our state government, by really advocating to make sure that we can remove those caps. That we can make sure that our state government is funding public transportation, and that we are working diligently with our partnering cities, our city council members, and people all across the state to do those types of things. At the same time, I think that we always have to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to explore opportunities to give people assistance where we can. We've got organizations, nonprofits like Jesse Tree, who are doing that with people with one-time rental assistance to prevent them from becoming homeless. We can be exploring similar options with our public, our nonprofit sector, with partnerships with Ada County to make sure there is an assistance available for people who might be forced out of their housing because of property taxes.
Okay, Meredith, what is a fair and reasonable tax burden to expect for any individual property owner, specific dollar amount, range, or percent of income?
Yeah, I know that this is this is definitely one of the issues on a lot of people's minds. I've knocked on more than 2,600 doors personally over the last couple of months, and it's what I hear time and time again. I met an 87-year-old man who's still working full-time specifically to pay his property taxes. Obviously, that's not a place we want to be in, and I think that we can prevent some of that additional taxation by building first where we have existing infrastructure to support it. So every time we're building somewhere new that we need new roads and fire stations and sewer lines and gas lines, that's costing taxpayers money, right? So if we can centralize that development first and build on the existing infrastructure we have, I think that that's the first way that we can lead by example across the valley and across our county. And then the second way would be to add housing to the market. I mean, we know that the theory shows that if we add development to this existing infrastructure, then we'll start to see, we'll start to at least catch up with the housing demand that we have.
Okay. So Meredith, keep the mic on, so we're just going to go back the other way here. So we'll kind of bounce back and forth here. So I'm going to read this very slowly because it's a little longer question than some of these, okay? The city recently contracted with a consulting firm to move forward with changes to the zoning code. And we have heard city officials express strong interest in upzoning nearly the entire city limits as Minneapolis has recently done. While the city's 2020 budget refers to this zoning project as a targeted zoning approach, changes to zoning can dramatically impact a neighborhood. Therefore, do you believe existing property owners deserve to have the neighborhood they have already chosen to invest in preserved and protected, just as other parts of the city have benefited from? Why or why not?
Okay, great question. First of all, I believe in absolute transparency, so it would be great to have the neighborhoods and the neighborhood associations and our residents involved in this process as soon as we all start hearing about it. But I know that there have been some really positive zoning changes that have taken place. In my experience on planning and zoning, we recently had something that came out of the CVS fight on State Street where they were able to rezone their neighborhood by working with the city to exclude any kind of drive-throughs from their neighborhood. This is the west side of downtown, and they're still looking for, they still want a vibrant area, and they want new investment, commercial mixed-use investment into that area, but they don't want it to be automobile-focused. And that was a great example of our residents working with the city to get to a place that was just exactly what the neighborhood wanted. So I don't think it's about, certainly a rezone of the city is not a good idea at all, but I think it's with working with the residents to figure out really what that neighborhood should look like in the long run, and let's make sure that we are able to make the decisions to support that long-term vision, and that would have to be reflected in the development code, which right now we know it isn't. So I support the revamp of the code, absolutely. I would love to be a part of that, but making sure that our residents are along with that ride every step of the way.
Okay. Jim, you want me to read the question again, or? Okay.
I've spent the last 9 months since I started this campaign riding my bicycle to every single neighborhood association in Boise. I've been to 26 of the 36 so far and counting, and I'm still trying to make it to the rest of them by the end of the year. These neighborhood associations, when I go to them, I know a lot of the people in there already because I've been working with them for the last 12 years trying to make their streets safer. And one of the things that I'm hearing at these neighborhood association meetings time and time again is this isn't what it says in Blueprint Boise. We built this comprehensive plan a few years ago, and it was something that all of our neighborhood associations, so many people in Boise were so involved with from the very beginning. And then they see this development happening in their neighborhoods and they say, this isn't what it said in the plan. I know that one of the things that we have to do is we need to take Blueprint Boise back to our neighborhood associations, have them look at it again and say, what has happened in the last 7 years since we passed this? What needs to be updated in it? And I think that we do need to look at zoning, and we do need to look at code, and we do need to figure out what we can put in place to make sure that we have teeth in our comprehensive plan that allows us to build neighborhoods that serve our families in safe, effective way. Everybody in Boise deserves to have a home, a safe place where they can be, clean drinking water, access to parks, all these different things that make Boise so important. And as we're developing these new neighborhoods, we have to have something that gives us the ability to build those communities. And some of that is zoning, some of it is code, and it absolutely starts with our neighborhood associations and our community members being at the table and designing exactly how that's going to look like.
Okay. Next question from the audience. Much shorter than the previous one, but still a good question as well. Merrick, where do you stand on the F-35s?
So I would start by saying that I absolutely support the current mission at Gowan Field and the A-10s and our servicemen and women. And I would like to see, I understood that the positive economic impact that that new mission might have on our economy. However, when I saw the environmental study, I think probably like many of you, I was really concerned, to say the least, about the several hundred homes that would be deemed uninhabitable. So I was really pleased when I heard that the Air Force has decided not to move that new mission here, but instead extend the existing A-10 mission.
Jimmy?
So 272 homes, 665 individuals, and potentially 2 schools are negatively impacted and potentially displaced by the F-35 mission. And this is a study that came from the Air Force. When we are looking at big issues like this, it is important that we are always talking with our community members who are affected by this issue the most. And in this case, those are our most vulnerable populations who are being displaced, and that's the Air Force as well. And the Air Force is telling us that this is not the preferred location for these F-35s, partially because of the impact that that's having to the community. And we have to listen to those voices, and we have to listen to the overwhelming voices in the community who are also telling us that this affects our livability, and this isn't something that we're willing to have in our most affordable neighborhoods in town when there isn't another option for them to go. One of the things that I heard, I was the very first candidate to publicly come out and oppose the F-35 mission as planned, and one of the responses was, the sound of the F-35s is the sound of freedom. To me, the sound of freedom is the sound of our individuals in our community being able to advocate for their own well-being and their community's well-being. And I think that one of the things that we have to do is we have to make sure that we don't just say no, we say come up with a better plan. Show us a plan of a 3rd runway on the other side of Gowan Road that doesn't affect all these houses, that allows us to support our military who fight for us and fight for that freedom to speak without displacing some of our most vulnerable people in the community. I think that we can do both, but I don't think that we've seen a plan that allows us to do that, and I can't be in support of the F-35 mission or any other mission until we see a plan that doesn't have that negative impact.
Okay, James, this one's coming right back at you. It's one of my questions, or our questions from Channel 66 on your side. What are the main deficiencies you see with the current leadership, and what would you do differently?
Sure. So one thing I want to make sure that I point out is that I've worked with every single city council member on the city of Boise. And I believe that they absolutely care and they are passionate about this community, and they're doing everything that they can to make it brighter for everyone. One of the reasons I decided to run for city council is because I have spent these last 12 years working with people who are experiencing homelessness, people who are getting out of prison, our lower income communities, the people who are affected by the issues that our city is experiencing the most. And I didn't see city council members up there who could really reflect the needs of our grassroots community. I don't know what I would be doing if I wouldn't have started working at the bike project, but I know I wouldn't have had the opportunity to learn and work with these people, from elected officials to people experiencing homelessness and everywhere in between. And I don't know that there is a city council member or a city council candidate who has that same grassroots access that I have to this community. It's something that's helped me grow personally every single day. It's giving me opportunities that I never could have imagined, and I think that we have a huge opportunity to overcome the obstacles that we're facing by bringing people to the table through collaborations, through creativity, and making sure the voices that are affected by issues the most are the very first ones that are heard. And that's what I think I can bring to that table.
Okay, Meredith, what would you do differently?
So I certainly what I've learned on Planning and Zoning Commission is that obviously we have a huge issue with transparency in the city. When we're trying to mitigate disputes between residents and developers in these really late night meetings, I know it can be done earlier. So really working towards that transparency and involving the neighborhoods from the start of a project and not just the final plan of the project. I think that's one step to do differently. I think there's a lot the city has been doing right, but what concerns me is that right now Laura McLean is the only city council member with any planning and zoning experience, and she's not going to be on council next year. We're still very much building this city, and planning and zoning is a big part of it. So I think that there's a lot of the issues that our city is facing that can be mitigated through smart growth and the right kind of development, where we can protect our green spaces, protect our open space, and also allow people the opportunity to live near where they work and where they go to school and the market, allowing them a sense of community in all of our neighborhoods, and not just a couple of them, not just Bound Crossing or Hyde Park, but that we can recreate that across the city without disrupting the existing neighborhoods, because we're doing it on major intersections that have supporting infrastructure and transit.
All right. Meredith, we'll ask this one of you. You can start off. If elected to the city council, what will be the first task you tackle when you are sworn in?
So if I haven't made it clear, I would revisit the development code. I think that's, right now, that's having major impact on our residents every day. I mean, we are seeing, and we're seeing decisions overturned that the Planning and Zoning Commission make, overturned by council regularly. We need to make sure that there's a clear path that residents understand and also that developers understand, so that at those meetings, we're not sending developers back to reinvest thousands and thousands of dollars to come up with plans that better fit the community. Let's do that the first time around so that it's clear for everybody, and we need the neighbors' input to make that happen, so that we're best reflecting each of the neighborhoods in the city through those development choices, and that's clear for the developers too, so that we're spending some less time at those late night meetings that I know I've seen many of you out there with me. Thanks.
Okay, we're kind of winding up our time for this segment, but Jimmy, you get to respond to the question as well. If elected to council, what will be the first task you tackle when you are sworn in?
Well, there are so many tasks that I'm eager to tackle, but I think the number one thing that we have to do is we have to change the way that our city officials communicate with its residents, with its community members. I think this is the root thing of every single problem that we face, whether it's the F-35s, the library, the stadium, urban renewal, any of those things that we talk about. We have to make sure we're doing a better job at communicating with our residents. One of the ways that we can do that is we can continue to invest in our neighborhood associations, specifically through Energize Our Neighborhoods. I don't know if Kathleen Lacey's in here, but if she is, she deserves a medal, because she has done such a great job at making sure our neighborhood associations have the resources they need to reach out to their community members, and it's effective. So we need to figure out ways where we can do that more, and we need to take our communication step one further. We keep telling you all the time, like, hey, I hope you're not busy, but we're going to have a meeting at this night, at this time, this location. Hope you can make it. What we need to start is one step further. We would say, hey, we realize you're busy. We want to talk to you about this issue. Where would you like that meeting to be? What time would you like that to be? What other barriers are you facing or is preventing your neighborhood from engaging? And what can we do to get you there? It's probably coming to your neighborhood association meetings in the first place. As I went to these 26 neighborhood associations so far, most of them have not been visited by a city council member. And that's not okay. We need to make sure that our city council members are there in your neighborhood associations, There's 36 neighborhood associations, 6 city council members. There's no reason that we couldn't commit to going to 6 different meetings each year. I'm telling you right now that I will commit to going to 12 neighborhood association meetings the first year to make sure that you're involved with those decisions at the very, very beginning.
There you have 2 candidates for C3, Mayor Stan and Jimmy Halliburton. Thank you so much. You guys did great. Okay, we're just going to take a couple of minutes here to get set up for round 2. Yes. If we can get the candidates to start coming up to the stage, candidates for seat 1. We have 6 candidates.
You got me. Must come up or good enough. A little bit. Okay, a few more candidates here, so just thanks for bearing with us to get this all set up for, this is our round 2, Forum 2, C1, and I just want to say a couple of things for the candidates. If you can speak, use that microphone. I know you'll have to share the 2 out there. Speak in the microphone and talk a little slower, because there's a little bit of a reverb and echo in here, and so the folks in the back can't hear that well as well up front. So just try to speak a little slower if you can. Okay, so we have here this is the Forum 2, seat 1, 6 candidates. We're going to take this to 8:10, give or take a couple of minutes. This is the seat currently held by Lauren McLean, who is currently running for mayor. The candidates are Patrick Bajay, you can raise your hand because these aren't in order the way you're sitting. Karen Danley, Tekla Gabby Michael, Chris Moniz, and Ryan Peck, and Brittany Sigliano. How'd I do on the names? Okay, yeah, I know, I knew I was gonna. Yeah, exactly, okay. Okay, so we all have, the format, we all have opening statements here. So let's, I'm going to go in the order I have. So Patrick, you go first with the opening statement.
Hey everybody, I'm Patrick.
There it is.
There we go. My name is Patrick Bajay. I am one of the 6 candidates for Boise City Council seat 1. And you kind of think about how it was going to go tonight. I decided that my background would come out in the questions, and so I'm going to launch right into it. Here's what I want to do for Boise. Number one, I want to preserve the affordable, high-quality life that we have here. This comes up all the time, but we don't really talk about it very well. This is our greatest asset, right? Every top 10 list photo of the city of Boise features the foothills. Everything we call our friends and family out of state to talk about is how easy and high quality our life is here in various ways. We've got to hang on to that because it's something that once destroyed, you can't get back. I'm proud to be endorsed by Conservation Voters for Idaho. I'm proud of my work on the boards of Idaho Conservation League and other conservation-based organizations. This is critical to who we are. Second is affordable housing and transportation. We talk about those like they're two different issues, and they're not, right? Transportation issues come from that distance between where you live and where you work, or where you do what you do with your daily life. That's something we have to tackle now in Boise because we're 10 years behind and we're growing gangbusters. The third thing that I want to bring to you all is accountable, responsible leadership. We see the symptoms of problems in this area come up all over the place, right? That is the root of the ballot initiatives that are going to be before us in November. That is the root of a lot of concerns that neighborhood associations like this one have. They feel like the accountability or the communication with their city leaders is lacking in some way. It's couched as transparency, it's couched as information exchange, it's couched as putting priorities in the wrong order. Whatever it is, I'm going to be an accountable leader for you. All of my literature has my phone number on it. My website has my phone number on it. I will tell you where I live. I will make myself available, and I will report back to you regularly with what we have accomplished, what we have done together. These are what I'm here to bring to you today.
All right. Next up, Karen Ganley.
Thank you. Thank you. My goal is to lead our community to embrace and preserve everything we love about Boise as we are growing. I am Karen Danley, and I'm running for Boise City Council seat number 1. I'm a teacher, a businesswoman, and a community advocate. As a teacher, I've taught in the Boise School District for over 20 years. I've taught at Taft, Whittier, Whitney, River Glen, and at 17 schools because I'm a traveling band director. And I think that really helps me get an idea of how the different demographics throughout the entire area. As a businesswoman, I'm a managing partner of our family business in Bismarck, North Dakota, Silver Ranch. As a community activist, I led the Stop Dynamis movement, which was an incinerator proposed at the landfill. From that grassroots, successful Stop Dynamis, I was then appointed to the Ada County Open Space and Trails Board, as well as the Ada County Solid Waste Advisory Committee. During this time of rapid growth, it's really important that we choose leaders that will carefully establish our priorities. For me, development must be done responsibly, carefully balancing the needs of our current residents as we welcome new residents. I also think it's really important that we keep an eye on our spending so that we can keep property taxes down so that people can age in place. I also want to be a strong voice for underrepresented neighborhoods. Thank you. And I believe Boise's best days are ahead of us, but in order for that to be the very best, we need all of our citizens, all the gifts that we have to give to this city. We need to have everyone invited to the table.
All right, next up, Tekla Gabby-Martha.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm so excited for the time that we have together this evening. I'm going to tell you about this weird name and strange face out here. My name is Tekla Gabby-Martha. I'm originally from Ethiopia. I'm a former refugee. I've lived in a refugee camp for 8 years before I got the ultimate luck to come to this country. I don't want to tell you about the refugee camp because I don't want to make you cry this evening. It's another purpose. But when I landed in Miami in August 8th of 2012, I was supposed to go to Fort Worth, Texas. I knew that was my destination, and I was so happy. But when I landed in Miami, I was told that my destination was changed to BOIID. That was on the airplane ticket. And I asked the person, where is this place? She smiled and said, I'm not sure, but I can guarantee you that it's inside the United States. This is all I know about this place, and I was shipped the next morning to this secret place. But right before the plane was landing, I looked through the small airplane windows, and I looked the mountains, the hills, and the river, which made an instant connection to the place where I was born and raised. And I said, this must be the right place. And it has been. The first month of my arrival, I made 3 long-term goals. First was education has been my priority, but I came with 7 years of school at age 21. The second was I said, in 5 years when I become citizen, I'm going to have my own place. I'm not going to live in an apartment. The third, I said, I promised to myself that I'm going to serve the community that welcomed and changed my life. And I was able to work hard to accomplish these goals. I'm graduating from BSU next May. I was able to buy my first house in West Boise in November of 2017, a wonderful neighborhood. And I'm serving right now in the United States Army Reserve at Gowan Field. And thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Chris Williams.
Hi, I'm Chris Moniz.
Moniz, I'll give you an extra second for that.
Moniz, all right.
Moniz.
Thank you. So I first moved to Boise in 2008. I came from Fargo, North Dakota, and when I was living there, I packed up my car with as much as I could and got rid of everything else and headed for Boise, Idaho. I had never been here, didn't know a single person out here, but I just knew that Boise was the place for me. It took 2 days of driving to get here, and it was all desert, really boring, and I questioned all the time whether or not I was making the right move. And as soon as I got to the top of Vista Avenue and saw Boise, I knew that I was home. And I quickly fell in love with all the parks and the mountains, everything that you could do here, the friendliness of the people. It was perfect. I just fell in love. One of the most interesting things that I saw when I first moved here was the intense pride that people had in Boise, as if Boise was their most prized possession, and I had never seen that anywhere else. That pride is still around today, but it's shadowed by a very real fear that we are losing our identity. I'm running for Boise City Council Seat 1 because I want to see actionable steps taken towards addressing our housing affordability crisis, staffing up our police and fire departments, and cutting back on unwise spending. Thanks.
Ryan Peck.
How's it going? Is that loud enough?
Sounds good.
Big thanks to everyone for being here, and big thanks to the neighborhood associations for putting this on, and extra big thanks to Mr. John Gannon. He was out handing out flyers in my neighborhood. I live a few blocks away. My name's Ryan Peck. I'm running for Boise City Council. Hopefully that's obvious. I'm up here. I live up here on the bench, just a few blocks away, like I said. I'm the co-founder of Boise Rock School, and I've been teaching in the biology department at Boise State since 2004. In the course of my week, I interact with hundreds of kids, and my background is this unique intersection of entrepreneurship, education, science, and arts and culture. I entered this race to advocate for the future of Boise. Boise is changing rapidly, and in the midst of this change, I want to make sure we're keeping the next generation in mind. Issues like affordable housing and all these things we'll be talking about tonight, transportation, suppressed wages, environmental quality, they're affecting us all now, and if we don't make good choices now, they're going to affect the next generation even worse. From my perspective, where I sit, I see a lot of youth culture that's getting pushed out in the favor of adult culture. AKA bar culture. If you look in the downtown core, there's no dedicated all-ages venue. There have been some historically, but they were pushed out by new development, which has often been bars or breweries or whatever. So I want to facilitate more cultural hubs, all-ages accessible cultural hubs for our kids, and places where big ideas can be exchanged. I want to promote more tools that build creative entrepreneurship and help grow a more sustainable economic ecosystem. If you lose your kids, you're going to lose your town. And at best, they'll be driving in from out of town to work a low-wage job, getting a parking ticket or whatever. So I believe in a sustainable future for Boise, and I'm all in for Boise. My name's Ryan Peck.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me? Yes. Thank you, Don, for being here. I want to thank the Neighborhood Association so much. This is a huge crowd. I kind of feel like it's a city council hearing, seeing all of these people. Luckily, we won't be here as long tonight, though. I want to thank again everybody for coming out, and for those that deliver flyers to notice. John, I know you were a big part of that, and I want to thank you. My name is Brittany Sigliano. I am running for Boise City Council Seat 1, just like everybody else up here. I grew up in Idaho, small town nearby called Emmett. Graduated high school, took off to northern Idaho for a little bit of school, and then to New York and over to Oregon, and finally clicked my heels 3 times and came back home, and have been in Boise now for a little over 15 years, I think. And there's no place like home. And this is a place that I have invested a lot of my personal time. I'm raising my daughter here along with my husband. And in that time that I've been here, being a stay-at-home mom for the first several years was grand and lovely. But conversations with a toddler are conversations with a toddler. So I started volunteering with my neighborhood association and did a lot of work with them, left for a little bit to go help start up a nonprofit that was geared at giving seniors an option to age in place. We got that up and running, and I had the opportunity to work with some really amazing people on that, and then was called back to my neighborhood association. And one meeting and my lone vote of no, I was the president, and have been in that role for the last 2 years until just recently. So working with the city, working with a lot of you, I've seen some of the things that are lacking at city and where we can all make a difference, and my goal is to make sure that your voices are a part of that change. Thank you.
Okay. So we do have candidate-submitted questions for this segment, and because we are sharing microphones, we're going to start with Chris, and we'll just pass the mic down, and then when we get to the end, we're just going to bring it back, okay? So this first question was submitted by Ron Peck. So Chris, you start, and then we'll go right down the line here. What brought you to Boise? If you aren't from Boise, and how long have you lived in Boise? You kind of explained a little bit about that, but that's the question.
So I first came to Boise because I wanted to go to school at NNU in Nampa, and probably a month after I got here, I realized, what the heck am I thinking, spending that much money for 1 year of school? No, I'm not doing that. I'm going to BSU. So that's what I decided to do. That's what brought me to Boise. And I've lived here since 2008 with about a 2.5-year break due to work.
Jacqueline?
Thank you for the question. A refugee brought me here. I lived in refugee camp for 8 years since I was 13 years old. And life in refugee camp, you all may know, and I really don't want to go into that situation. But I was one of the lucky ones to get the ultimate opportunity to come to the United States. And as I mentioned, I came accidentally to Boise, which I wouldn't really prefer any place better than Boise. I've been here for a little bit more than 7 years. I've lived in apartments for the last 6 years, but I've mentioned I was able to buy my first house in West Boise on November of 2017, right before the market took off. Thank you.
As I mentioned, I grew up in Emmett, and while Emmett is a wonderful small town, I needed, after being in New York and Portland, Oregon for a little while, something just a tad bit smaller, and Boise fit that bill. And I'm so glad that I've been here. I've been here for 15 years, raising my 9-year-old daughter, met my husband here, and we have created a really wonderful life because it's really the people that are keeping us here. To be perfectly honest, we've talked about moving, but why would we leave a great place is what we always keep coming back to. And that's the people that make this city really wonderful. Thank you.
So you can see why I didn't introduce myself background-wise at the beginning. I grew up in North Idaho in what trendy people call an off-the-grid household, which is kind of modern newspeak for no phone, no electricity, no running water, and lots of hard work, right? We joke sometimes that a big part of my childhood was adulthood, and that was certainly true. I moved out when I was 15 years old. I struggled a little bit and made it into college, floundered, found myself, graduated from the University of Idaho as the College of Letters and Arts and Social Sciences Distinguished Graduating Senior, and worked for about 6 years for the Forest Service as a firefighter. Doing that taught me that there are basically two ways to make it in this world. You can make a living with your brain, or you can do it with your back, right? You can move objects, or you can move information. Taking that lesson to heart, I went away to law school. I was lucky to 3 years later emerge with a truly world-class education from the University of Berkeley School of Law. That taught me many things about how our society works, about how things are and are not accomplished, and about how to really make progress in this world. I worked in a large law firm, and I became miserable and lonely, and I missed home. I moved back to Idaho, and as a man in his mid-30s looking to continue his career, Boise was the logical place to be. So with all that background, right, I am so happy to be here, to be contributing, to be giving back to the community and the state that really brought me from a very poor kid to who I am today. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Karen Danley, and I grew up in Bismarck, North Dakota. My father was an optometrist, as well as a rancher and a farmer. My mother was a librarian. And from Bismarck, North Dakota, I earned a scholarship to the University of Oregon and worked on my music education degree. And then I moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and taught at a Title I school in Albuquerque. Then I received a call and said, hey, there's a job opening in Boise. Why don't you come check it out? And I simply said, I've never heard of Boise. But knowing that their catchphrase or selling point was, you know, I think you'll love it. We have a green belt and lots of trails, and I know you love the outdoors. So over the next year, I checked out Boise, and I did absolutely love it. So I moved here in 1993. So I've been in Boise for 26 years. After 3 years of teaching in Boise, I did move to Boulder, Colorado, where I earned my master's degree and was a grad assistant at Boulder, Colorado. So I've taught in Albuquerque, Salem, Eugene, and Eugene, Salem, Albuquerque, and Boulder. So right now I have a family. My daughter's 16, and my husband's actually from Hawaii, but we met, and he lives here and is a pilot at Micron. Thank you.
All right. My name is Ryan Peck. I'm a fourth-generation Idahoan. I grew up in Twin Falls, which is just down the road a little bit. My grandmother lived here when I was a kid, and I visited here often. After graduate school, I thought, well, I should go out and see, somewhere cool or whatever. And I lived in the Bay Area for a couple years teaching 5th grade. But it wasn't, it didn't take very long for me to also realize, I missed Idaho's rivers, I missed the mountains, I missed the open spaces. So I moved back in 2004 to teach biology at Boise State, and I've been here ever since. The thing I love about Boise is that, if you're humble, you're hardworking, and you're gracious, my experience has been that Boise will help lift you up and help you be successful. And it's a part of Boise that I love very much. And I want to make sure it's there for others. It's enabled me to start a couple nonprofits and a couple of small businesses. We started Boise Rock School at the beginning of the recession, and so I believe in that part of Boise. I want to help it grow. Thanks.
Okay. Ron, we're now just going to come back here. Here's the second question. I just want to say to you, I really appreciate it. Stuff, with having 6 candidates out here, you're keeping on time and paying attention to the clock, so I really do appreciate that. Okay, so this comes from Tekla. The question is, for all of you, we'll go right down the line. If elected, what would you do to ensure underrepresented communities like people of color, refugees, and new Americans, and people living in poverty have their issues represented at the City Hall table?
Okay. Yeah, in the case of, in the case of underrepresented communities, and in this case I also want to include, youth, especially teenagers. I think one of the first things is figuring out barriers. We know that transportation is a big barrier, and we have to acknowledge there's a lot of other barriers and work to get rid of them. You can start by using a principle from education called a needs assessment. You're talking to folks, you're figuring out what those barriers are, and you're working to lower those. Something I've been thinking about in terms of the transportation issue, in terms of city council meetings, I think it would be so cool to have actually like traveling city council meetings. As an example, there could be, for the month of January, all the meetings would be at Hillcrest Library. For the month of February, all the meetings would be at Collister Library. And I think just that sort of mobile, making it a little bit more accessible, could immediately break down a little bit of those transportation barriers. And these traveling meetings could also be quickly moved when particular needs of a neighborhood or an area are being affected. But we can't make decisions based on assumptions, so I think the other critical step is making sure we have strong alliances between the city and our nonprofit sector. There's nonprofits that are doing incredible work, Janus, International Rescue Committee, and a bunch of others. So I think the other critical step is strengthening those nonprofit city partnerships and communication. Thanks.
And if any of you candidates want me to read the question again, I'm more than happy to do that. Just ask and I'll read it again.
Thank you, Tekla, for this question. I think it's an important one. I taught at Taft and Whittier, which has
Bring the microphone a little closer to your mouth. Yeah.
Thank you, Tekla, for this question. I appreciate it. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Tekla, for this question. I've taught at Whittier and Whitney, which both have a high refugee population. And I've really enjoyed fostering their sense of music and bringing their culture and especially percussion and having a part in their education. I think it's really important that we improve our public transportation so that people can reduce their cost of living and be able to use some bus system or any other kind of public transportation. Affordable housing, that we have a variety of lots that advocate for a variety of demographics within the same neighborhood. And I'm really a strong advocate for underrepresented neighborhoods. And I think it's really important that we consider and start the conversation to change our voting system from an at-large voting system to where everyone votes for city council to actually having districts. There's all the cities I've researched our size have districts so that we have a variety of leaders and more diversity at the table, which then they would have a local representative, someone who comes from their neighborhood, and more people can run. Thank you, Tekla, for that question, and thank you for running for city council.
I think I still have the question, because it's one that I think about a lot as a lawyer and as kind of a efficient government person, right? The question, as I understood it, was how do we ensure that underrepresented people in our community are properly represented? And that means more than talking about what we're doing for people. It means more than engaging in initiatives that might make us feel better about how we are representing the needs of people that may not be like us or may not be situated like us. It means actually communicating and engaging with the communities that we are least likely to interact with. right? It means not listening to every voice who comes to a city council hearing to testify, but thinking hard about who can't get there. That can be an economic issue, that can be a language issue, that can be a general civic knowledge issue, but thinking very hard about the voices in our community who we don't even hear because they're not in the room. There are concrete things we can do. Yes, transportation is wonderful, right? How about validated parking or a bus pass for everybody who comes to a city council hearing? That's great. But those are the people who come downtown. How about getting out and really listening to what people need to say or have to say in their particular neighborhoods? It's a civic responsibility to think hard about those people. And the best that I can offer you sitting right here is I take that very, very seriously, and I will. Thank you.
I've got it, Don. Thank you.
You got it? Okay.
Tekla, thank you for the question. It's very meaningful and very timely, I think, right now. I think really it begins by listening and by working together, working with local agencies such as Janus, Agency for New Americans, and even looking at our homeless agencies, Interfaith Sanctuary and Jesse Tree. That's how we get really a truly much deeper understanding. You know, we are all here tonight. We have the opportunity to be here, and we were able to probably jump in our cars and get here, but there's a lot of people that were not. And as a neighborhood association, as a past leader, I'm going to bring it back to the neighborhood associations because I think that's a place that we can also be, that can also help tremendously in getting that understanding cleared up for us. And I'll give you my example. In the work I've done with the neighborhood associations, and then as I've been attending everyone's neighborhood association meetings during this campaign, one that really had a really powerful impact on my heart, made a big impression, was Liberty Park neighborhood. 36% of their population is minority. And the things that Liberty Park, with very limited resources, the things that they are doing to engage their neighbors, thinking in ways that make sure that everyone can be involved, and they are. Looking at neighborhood associations who know their neighbors best and who know their population best, I think it's the perfect opportunity for us to have a good understanding of the needs and involve the neighborhood associations much more. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me tell you a story behind this question. This was 2015. I was at my friend's house. His name is Brandon. I asked him, so I'm going to share. He's one of the youth pastors that I go to church, Discovery Church here on the bench. And he invited the whole Karen and Nepal church to his house. We had a wonderful evening, food, music, and at the end, this elderly guy stood up and he said, "Hey, Brendan, thank you for having me to your house. This is the first time in 5 years that I have been to an American or local-owned house." I was shocked, because by then, I was almost in half of Boise houses for no reason. Sometimes we think that providing materials will solve the issues that we have, the issues of integration, the issues of trust, and working together. But it's beyond that. It's so small relationship that we build among each other, inviting to your house for a dinner. That changes the whole purpose and the whole perspective. Of course, I work with the IRC right now, and I work with the Boise Police Department in their community policing program, and I'm one of the ambassadors for the Kirby program at the city of Boise, which I really just trying to engage and break the bridge with the new Americans in the broader community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you hear me? So, good question. I agree with a lot of what has already been said, so I'm not going to take up a whole lot of time, but I think that just getting out and talking to these communities is really important. That goes for elected officials, but also all of us as individuals. If we see a community that is not being represented, I think that we have a duty as neighbors to go out and really help these communities get involved and have their voice heard.
Okay, Chris, we'll keep it right with you, going back. This one's from Brittany, Idaho. The question is, how would you change the way neighborhood associations are involved in city government?
I think that us being here tonight is a good indication that the neighborhood associations are doing a really good job of staying involved in the city government. Something that they could probably, the city and the associations might be able to partner up together when it comes to the city getting word out on different issues. For example, the library, they had a lot of meetings for that, and there's a lot of meetings for other things when the zoning issue comes up. The city can partner with these associations to set up times, more reasonable times for people to come and talk and make their voices heard.
Okay. Declan?
Would you repeat the question, please? I know English is hard for people who speak other language, so it's my third language.
How would you change the way neighborhood associations are involved in city government?
Thank you. Just so you know, I'm not here to change everything or anything at all. Well, being said that, we have neighborhoods that are not involving with the city as they're supposed to be. My campaign is pretty much just focusing, bringing every voice in every neighborhood to the city. I live in West Boise, where we always felt we're left out, and there is a reason for that, of course, because we don't vote. A lot of the elected officials are from one place in downtown in northern area, and they vote. But what do we do to involve and engage every neighborhood and every neighborhood association so that they have a voice? We benefit from their input and make sure that Boise is a livable place for every neighborhood and everyone. So what I would do is I will work with the already strongest neighborhoods, but also I will work hard to make sure that the other neighborhoods have an access and make sure that we support them to become strong and involved as it was supposed to be and have a voice.
Being a former neighborhood association president, I am ridiculously passionate about the work that neighborhood associations do, all as volunteers. And I know, like many of you, you have probably spent countless hours at a planning and zoning hearing, a city council hearing, late into the night, and if you haven't been doing that, maybe you've been watching it online in between dinner or putting kids to bed. I think that the voice of neighborhood associations really are the voice of the city. And by involving neighborhood associations at a very high level in the city's planning processes, we can work towards a city that everybody's happy with. We know there's a lot of frustration, and we know that different parts of the city want different results. And we need to make sure that those neighborhood associations are well represented. As the city moves towards creating new neighborhood plans for some of the new neighborhood associations or updating 20-year plans, having those neighborhood representatives at the table to really guide how their neighborhood is going to grow will ensure that in the future we all have a city that we can be proud of. Thank you.
It's a great question, because how our neighborhoods interact with our city is an important part of how city decisions affecting the neighborhood will be made. The answer to the question, how would I change how the city interacts with its neighborhood associations, is honestly, I wouldn't change much. It's important for us to remember that although a neighborhood association is an important voice, it is an advocacy group. It is a group that is advocating, as it should, on behalf of the well-being of the people in that neighborhood. And to neighborhood associations, I always say, keep it up, work harder, push harder. But that's also true of every advocacy group that I interact with. Every advocacy group that I interact with wants a more important seat at more important tables. every advocacy group that I interact with wants to be more involved and earlier in every decision that's made. So it's important to remember that, yes, we want thriving neighborhood associations who come and provide us with important information and who receive information we have and are part of the process. But it's important to remember also that they are not our government, right? They are advocates for an important constituency. So the answer to the question, how would I change how the neighborhood associations interact with the city government? I would continue to recognize that they are an advocacy group. They're a welcome one. I will continue to listen and to make myself available, just like I do for every advocacy group that comes to me. But I would also recognize the proper role, right? They are not our elected officials, and they shouldn't step much beyond that role. I want to hear from them, but they're in the proper place.
Thank you. As someone currently serving on the Northwest Neighborhood Association in Northwest Boise, I am always actively looking for ways for us to become more involved in our political process. So after observation and research, I really think that my proposition is very important and does make a significant change in the role of neighborhood associations. So once Boise would be divided into 6 districts, that would be about 6 neighborhood associations per district. And once that is in place, like it is in most cities our size, you would, for instance, have more people coming from that district and from those neighborhoods, and really getting to know now, instead of 240,000 people, it would be 40,000 people, getting to know those people and campaigning just to that area and getting to know that area, and encouraging people to vote because they have an advocate coming from their neighborhood and then disseminating information back once they hear from city council or there's things that they're discussing. So coming back to the people and coming to the neighborhood presidents, asking their opinion, what do you think? So it's a more organic grassroots concept of what's happening at City Hall, and then disseminating that information. So in this situation, each vote counts more, and instead of neighborhoods playing defense during hearings, we will have a seat at the table, and it will be at the beginning of the discussions and a vote.
All right, the sign says speak. You guys can't see it, but there's a little sign that says speak and then don't speak. But it's there. In some ways, I think the question provided by Tekla and the question provided by Brittany are, in a roundabout way, intersecting at a more broad question, which is, how do we ensure better community representation at City Hall, which is important. For me, I've done stuff with a lot of neighborhood associations. The Energize Our Neighborhoods program is terrific. We've had Rock School kids play at lots of really cool events for the Energize Our Neighborhoods program. One thing I notice a lot is there's not a lot of new youth coming on to the neighborhood associations. And so I think in the empowerment of those neighborhood advocacy groups, one of the first things that the city could do within the Energize Our Neighborhoods program is really do a little bit more work to try to get some more kids to be showing up to be the new members of the neighborhood association and providing their unique viewpoints as youth. I know what the next question is, so I'll talk about the district thing that Karen was just talking about in just a second. So I'll put the mic down like this.
Reset it? Okay. You're a step ahead of me. I like that. So this question is from Karen, and Karen touched upon it just seconds ago, but the official question to all of you. Currently, our city council members are voted at large. What is your opinion on switching to a system that votes by electoral district, and why would you switch it?
It's an interesting question. It really they're voted for at large, and people still look at me like, wait, why are there seats then? Why isn't it just a roll off of the top 3 or something like that? So potentially, I think it'd be a great idea to have city council districts. having a true city council district, sort of what Karen was touching on, that person is going to be better able to energize their constituents. They're going to be better in touch with their constituents. Right now, running for city council, you have to reach, the 140,000 registered voters in Boise. That's a tough task for a city council person. If you're running for state legislator, you have a district that's just a little slice of the city, right? And they're at the state level. So you start to think about it, and you're like, wow, there is real power now that Boise is larger than it was when this system was implemented. There is a real power and a lot of good to come from having true council districts, and I think it would help energize voter participation overall, and I think it would be empowering candidates to reach a higher percentage of their constituents and getting more issues brought to City Hall in a more organic and meaningful way. Thanks.
Thank you, Ryan. I absolutely agree. Hence why I have, 2 days ago, I did present an amendment to the city code that I will take to city council once I'm elected. So this empowers the neighborhood associations. Currently, we have 5 out of the 6 council members from 2 neighborhood associations, and they're adjacent to each other. When I first moved to Boise in 1993, when I was about 26, I decided, okay, I'm going to vote, register to vote. Okay, what district am I in? And I was surprised to find out that it was an at-large voting situation. So that large system works and works well when it's a smaller city and it's more homogeneous. But Boise has grown so much that we're much more diverse demographics. And it's time that we have representation from throughout the entire city. Other cities that I've researched, and there's none our size that I've found that are not at large, that are not by district. And the reason you would do it at district is instead of at large, is even though you have districts like individual representatives from each district, but voted at large as we do our Ada County commissioners, is if you don't have the voting for the representative within the district, then you may actually have someone win that isn't the person chosen to represent that local neighborhood. And the whole point is to represent that local neighborhood and bring back the information and have that communication.
Thank you.
This is an interesting question because it comes up periodically every few years, every 5 years, every 10 years in Boise. And it's certainly one that we've visited in the past. Here are my thoughts on it, right? First, just sort of a bedrock leadership, lifestyle, problem-solving strategy is not to try to fix anything that isn't broken. So up here, we have candidates from the West End, you have candidates from the Bench, you have candidates from Northwest Boise, you have a candidate from East Boise, and you have a candidate from the North End. So each of you will face a voting decision where you have an opportunity to elect a candidate from neighborhoods all across the city in Boise. So it can't be the case that we're not getting candidates from around the city, right? Second, the second sort of bedrock leadership problem-solving principle is if you're going to fix something, don't accidentally break it and make it worse. Here's my concern with districts. The Idaho State Constitution requires that city councils can be made of no more than 6 people. That means slicing the city into 6 parts. How do you draw those lines? Do you gerrymander them? Do you do them fairly? There's a real opportunity for influence peddling and power brokering there that will distract us from the fact that we're 10 years behind on transportation, on housing, and the fact that there are communities we're not reaching. And finally, quickly, we all live and work and play and recreate in different parts of the city. It's not really accurate to say we're from one part of the city when we live in one place and work in another. Who represents us then? These are my questions before I can sign on to something like that.
Thank you.
Karen, thanks for that question. Like Ryan, it's one of the top 2 questions I get. Oh, what district are you running from? I'm not. Oh, what does this mean? So it's a long conversation that I end up having with lots of people at lots of doors, but it's an education opportunity that I see as well. I believe it's incredibly important to make sure that everybody and every part of the city is well represented. And I think that there probably are some benefits to districting, but I think it's a much larger conversation. I have some concerns about it. You know, as a neighborhood association former president, neighborhood associations to me are vital in this city. And I don't know, I guess part of that conversation would have to be how would those lines be drawn? I would hate to see neighborhood associations be broken up, especially some of the neighborhoods that have been established for as long as they have. And secondly, neighborhood associations, even though oftentimes we work together, there are fundamental differences between each of those neighborhoods. And I think probably the best example that I can give is the Downtown Neighborhood Association and West Downtown. Two neighborhood associations that know how to work well together, but have very different ideas on how they want to grow as a neighborhood association. So I have a lot of concerns about that, and I think probably a greater question is how do we get, it's kind of the theme of tonight, how do we make sure that more people are involved, and how do we make sure that we get out to those people and not require them to come to one central location always. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and this is indeed a good question. But my mission is I would like to do what will help engage more people in our local elections. Even though districts might elect council members from the districts, and we might have a council members from different districts, but my concern is it might bring another division. I believe we have already enough divisions in our country, don't we? So my focus in my campaign has been pretty much engaging in educating the whole city at large and at one. Because we have issues that pretty much touch the city limit, which is the housing crisis, goes from north into West Boise and from across city. The same can be said for the public transportation. It actually goes across the city to our neighborhood cities, Eagle, Nampa, and beyond. So I think it would be more effective to work as one city, and people who are running for the city council will need to learn the issues that facing the city of Boise at large. Thank you.
Thank you. This is one of those questions that when you look at it, it just seems like the answer is simple, and then you start looking into it and you realize, oh, this is not as simple or cut and dry as I thought. And that's exactly what I thought. I thought, yeah, of course, we should have districts, but as I got more into it, the concerns that have been raised so far are valid concerns. I do think that there would be a huge conflict with dividing up the lines of these districts and gerrymandering, and that I think that would take away the focus from other very pressing issues. Yeah.
All right, well, you stay with the microphone. Those are all great questions from the candidates. Thank you for submitting them. Some questions now from the audience. What measures might you pursue to support businesses that are seeking to provide a gun-free environment for their customers? What measures might you pursue to support businesses that are seeking to provide a gun-free environment for their customers? It's loaded. It's a loaded question, no pun intended, yeah.
I can't think of measures or anything like that. If a business wants to keep people from carrying guns in their stores or in their place of business, that's fine. They can do that. Personally, I I do have my concealed weapons license. I am a gun carrier. I would never carry my gun out in the open into a store. Personally, I think that's just a call for attention. If I'm out in the wilderness, out camping, I will have it open carry, but when I'm out in the store, I'm not going to brag about it and show it to everyone. So I'm very much in favor of gun rights and also in favor of business owners having the right to decide if they want guns in their store or not.
Okay. You get bonus points for being the first one to have to answer that question.
I may need to repeat the question, please.
What measures might you pursue to support businesses that are seeking to provide a gun-free environment for their customers?
Thank you. I'm in the Army, and I own firearms. I have a license, and I live in Idaho, obviously. I don't believe this is something that I would make any measures at the city level, but I will work and study more about the laws at the state level, and I will work with our elected officials at the state house to make sure that our businesses in the city have the right to protect if they have a threat of open weapon arms going to their businesses. There are some concerns, of course. It's a national level, it's a state level, and of course it's affecting our city as well. But it really it's something that will come from the legislatures of our elected officials at the state. But I will support whatever decision comes, and I will respect the state law at the moment that it's the state that allows open carry, and then obviously support that as well.
Great question, and thank you for this. As somebody who has worked with the Moms Demand Action Group to ensure that our kids, especially at school, are safe and feel safe, and making sure that we can try and get those universal background checks on gun sales, I think this question is very timely. And I think it's actually a relatively simple answer. In Idaho, we value two things very dearly: guns and private property rights. And I think it's as simple as that. As a city council member, I will support the private property rights of a business owner to establish a gun-free business. There's nothing that will force a open carry or a concealed weapons carrier to go visit that shop. That's a Second Amendment right, that they have the opportunity to carry that gun and visit whatever shops they want as needed. Not everyone's going to take that opportunity to be a gun-free environment. There's going to be plenty of places for those folks to be. But I think supporting those private property rights and still ensuring that those Second Amendment rights are protected, I think it's a real simple balance, and we offer that support to them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, I'll answer this question by telling you how I feel and then telling you what I think, because it's really complicated, right? I am a hunter and a fisherman and a firearms owner, and here's how I feel about it. I feel like I refuse to live in a community where children are shot and killed in our schools. This brings me into conflict with some of my personal values, but that's where I draw the line. And that's how I feel. But here's what I think. This is incredibly complicated. It's incredibly complicated because the question was directed at prospective members of a city council. So the question is, how would you bring the power of your city's government to bear to protect businesses who don't want firearms on their premises? It's a complicated question in Idaho because if you pass an aggressive city ordinance that's restrictive of gun rights, the Idaho legislature will step in and lop your head off, right? You have to be practical about this. It's also a complicated question because no matter what you do, you will end up in relentless litigation from people on both sides of the issue. So it's not a question with an easy answer, and there's no simple balance. It's also not a question, frankly, that I'd given a whole lot of thought to until it was read here today. So here's the ideas that I've come up with. One, the city could publish or disseminate information about businesses that have chosen to have these policies in place. People could make informed decisions, and you could get some city encouragement for people to shop in places where firearms are not permitted. 2, we'll pick this up later. Thank you.
Thank you. As I previously mentioned, I was brought up in North Dakota, raised on a ranch, and so we were raised with guns. And I think something really important to look at here too is the focus on how to safely handle a gun, storing it, shooting it, and my daughter just took the gun safety course this summer, and those are all important things. So as far as the business part of it, I do think that as a property right, that you own that property, you have a right to say what you allow on that property to some extent. But I don't think that would hold up in the court of law. So you could simply have a situation where you could say guns aren't welcome, but I don't know that, I'd have to look into it further to see how far you could actually hold that up, because it is a Second Amendment right to carry a gun, and this is an open carry state.
Okay, I'm waiting for the speak. Okay. Guns are tricky for me as well. I mean, as an advocate for youth, I talk to a lot of kids, and they express a lot of concerns, and they live in a different world than I lived in when I was in, grade school or junior high, and so I'm always cognizant of that. I think the question is a really interesting intersection of our U.S. Constitution, state law, and then the ultimate power a city has to maybe do anything. And really, I'm going to really deflect to ultimate business rights, as some of these other candidates have done. And if a candidate wants to, or if a business wants to say, we don't want to have open carry here, it's a citizen's choice not to support that business. And I think that's the simple answer for a very complex question. Even though it still says speak, I'm going to.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question here that's actually one of our questions that we submitted from Channel 6 and 6 on your side, but it also has been asked by a number of people here. So try to keep this one under the time limit, but we've been waiting to get to this one, so we'll start at the end and bring it back, and that should take us to our time. Where do you stand on Proposition 1 and 2 regarding the new library and multi-use stadium?
Speak. Okay, cool. Well, we've been talking a lot about the library and stadium for a while, and as a candidate, I have to really make it clear, as a candidate who's running to advocate for youth, I get super stoked about all ages, egalitarian cultural hubs. I think that they are real value to the city. But that being said, I do believe in fiscal responsibility and a deliberative, democratic decision. So in the case of the library, it's pretty clear that a lot of our community members feel disenfranchised and left out, and they didn't feel like they had a say. And you have to honor that. So for me, I think it's great that the vote's there. And I think these are two very different projects as well. I think one is a public project, which is the library project. The other is, as it's being touted, more of a public-private partnership, which starts to get weird for me. But I think that the vote's there on the ballot is awesome, and I think that we should take a step back and think about the process. And as we've been saying all night, get more community members involved, have the process be more transparent, and see where we end up. So, yeah, does that make sense? Mic drop.
Thank you.
I advocate to vote yes on Proposition 1 and 2 because of the fiscal responsibility. We need to have a say in whether we want to be burdened with debt or how that money is being used. The first proposal, from financial proposal was for the library was $32 million in lease financing. That's back in May, really perked my ears, and I investigated that. And what's the terms of that loan? and what's the percentage rate, and how much are we paying in the long run if it's a 30-year loan. That really concerns me. And now it's changed that we don't need that, and that we actually have enough funds from that saved already. So we're going to delay the purchasing of property for the Hillcrest Library and put that into the main library. That's a priority I don't agree with, because I would like to reduce congestion rather than adding to congestion, and I would like people to use what's in their neighborhood, and neighborhood libraries promote people to come walk, ride their bikes, and drive very short distances. The other part of it is that the money is also coming from remodeling instead of rebuilding Station Number 5, and in 2015 we voted $2.8 million to actually rebuild Station Number 5, and now they're saving $5 million by remodeling instead of rebuilding it, putting it to the library. So I would like us to have a vote on it, so vote yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. This question is a doozy because it's like 8 or 9 questions in one, which gives you like 8 or 9 seconds to each piece. I think first we should recognize that a ballot initiative is an incredibly important, incredibly powerful, incredibly meaningful tool. Right? When you rally 7,000 people to sign a petition to get something on the ballot, it's a sign to me that something has gone really wrong. That's certainly what happened in Idaho with Medicaid. We now have a ballot initiative on that. It's a sign that the leadership is out of step with what the people want, to a degree where they're angry enough to go assert their power. So, regardless of what happens with those propositions, it's critical that we hear the lesson that we were taught, which is, whoa, we are upset, right? That's the most important thing that the ballot initiatives can accomplish, and they've already accomplished it. They have sent a powerful message that says, we are not being heard, and we are willing to do something about it. Digging into the particular propositions, I have some concerns. And this is me as a lawyer. This is not me as a voter. I'm not convinced that they're constitutional. And what that means is, if they are passed, we will have a court fight. We will pay for that court fight. And here's the worst case scenario. They are struck down by a court. So what happens then? People were so angry that they put something on the ballot because they felt that their government was doing something they didn't want. It got litigated, and the court sided with the government. All of that is incredibly unhealthy. So to me, what I want to say is, I heard you on the ballot initiatives. I heard you loud and clear, and I've heard you already.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not surprised that this one came up. This is probably the number 3 question that I get door knocking. Where do you stand on the library? So I'm actually going to start with the stadium first because it's a little bit of an easier answer for me. 2 things on the stadium. I have not seen, and I don't know if anyone else has, but I have not seen a business plan presented for the stadium as of yet. Also, I have not seen any data that says it's good for cities to be involved in stadium ownership. So that's something I think would be wonderful in the hands of a private developer and left there. With respect to the library, we do need a new and improved downtown library. Maybe not new, but we do need improved. I'm a bit of a preservationist, so I have a hard time with the destruction of a very good functioning building. There was a breakdown in the communication. I know this is a conversation that's been happening for 20 plus years, but somewhere along the line, the conversation broke down and information was not disseminated out to the general public. And I truly believe that if that would have been happening and a bond would have been put forward, we wouldn't be in this position. The city of Boise has shown how supportive we are of spending extra money. We've done it for the foothills twice, we've done it for fire stations, and we've done it for schools. And to rally the number of people, over 7,000 for signatures, to say, I want to be heard, that's a really big deal. I'm proud of the group that was able to rally so quickly and get this many signatures, and I intend to listen to them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know you have only the opportunity to say no or yes on the ballot. I wish we have an opportunity to explain it, because in real life, it's not about yes or no. It's about balancing, compromising, and budget. Now, I'm a big supporter of a library. I came here with no access to computer or Wi-Fi in my entire life. And I was always running to the library to use computer, search for jobs, and read books. I love reading books. And the library is not only for that. My fellow refugees come here with the same struggle. And they always go there, access the computers and study groups. It's a facility of engagement and often a shelter for disadvantaged people. We need a library. However, I will not support the proposed project for two reasons. One, the location. I don't believe allowing that kind of concrete around the Boise River, which is one of my favorite areas. And then I don't think it's an ideal place because our city is growing. And we already have parking issues and traffic issues around downtown area. And I would support a neighborhood, smaller libraries where children and families can access easily.
Thank you.
So, to talk about the stadium first, I do not support using public funds for a stadium. In the paperwork that we were all sent, one of the rebuttals for the stadium says that it provides low-cost entertainment, and as soon as I read that, I was like, are you kidding me? Have they ever been to a stadium? I mean, you pay $4 for, a bottle of water. That's not low cost to me. So I'm not for using public funds to build a stadium. As for the library, I think this initiative speaks to a larger issue, which is that a large portion of Boise residents want to be involved with how our money is being spent. I think it also speaks to us and says that the library is not a priority right now. I support libraries. I have my library card. I'm a crazy reader, but those are not, the library is not our priority right now. We can be using that money to be addressing our housing affordability, our transportation, police and fire departments. There's so many better uses that we could be using that money for. So I will be voting yes for both of those.
All right, thank you. Fantastic answers from all six of you. The 6 candidates for seat number 1. Thank you. Okay, we're just going to take another minute or two to get ready for our third round. It'll be seat 5. So the 3 candidates for seat 5, come on up here.
Should be done by 8:45. The expectation was for you going to have kind of like we're going to talk throat to stops into it. There's like not an expectation. They can put pad video if they want on it, but you're not responsible for that. So right. Right. So you could, if you, let's say you want to make it about the stadium, right? You could send them, say, hey, pull 2 songs about the stadium or something, or the library, and then you could read into that, have the songs in the stadium.
Okay.
I would, just because if you were doing a package, it would be a lot easier for you to like go through. We got all of the candidates. I didn't expect all 3 to show up, so now that's all 11 candidates for she's running for re-election. But once you're re-elected, you just didn't have to run again.
Okay, if you can find your way to your seats, we'll get to round 3.
She's not up for re-election. Not every seat's up for re-election.
Okay, this is our final forum this is seat number 5, seat currently held by Elaine Clegg. And we will start with Elaine over on that side, Brady Fuller, and Debbie Lombard-Bloom. So we'll start with, let me see, we're going to start with you, Brady, with opening statements. Okay. I think it is.
Can you hear me now? All right, good. Well, thank you all for coming out tonight, and thank you for everyone for organizing this event. My name is Brady Fuller, and I am running for Boise City Council Seat 5. I just wanted to start off by introducing myself, who I am, especially as a first-time candidate for City Council. So, again, my name is Brady. I was born at St. Luke's in downtown Boise, and I have had the honor and privilege of watching this city grow and evolve and transform into the city that it is today. I went to the University of Idaho, where I studied political science and international studies, and then I served in the United States Peace Corps. I served as an English teacher in a rural village, kind of where the jungle and the rice fields come together of Western Cambodia. I served as an English teacher for 2 years there, and then I returned back to Boise. As I got back, I was appointed by Governor Little to serve on his Commission for Service and Volunteerism, to find ways to connect everyday Idahoans in their own communities and to get them involved. In addition to that, we oversee the AmeriCorps program for the state of Idaho. In addition to all of that, I also am, I worked for a tech company here in Boise that helps startup businesses grow and expand their companies through the support of advisors. And it was a really great company that did a lot of good work. Unfortunately, about 2 weeks ago, they did massive layoffs, like a lot of companies in 2019, in part because of automation, and I was laid off. And I thought, how am I going to explain this to people? I was concerned, I was almost embarrassed at that. And I just started talking to people and going out and door knocking and letting them know. And it turns out there's a lot of people that have either experienced it themselves or they've known somebody that's done it or been through a layoff. And I talked to a lady the other day who lived over in the East End, and she was talking to me, and she said, you know, maybe this is the universe's way of saying that this is exactly where you need to be, here serving the people of Boise. And she's like, over the next month, you need to get involved and you need to reach out to as many people as possible. And that's exactly what I plan to do over the next 27 days. Thanks.
Thank you. Debbie Lombard-Bloom.
Hi. We're kind of having a little bit of, we're all getting kind of tired now, so I'll keep it short. I'd never thought that I was going to be in politics before. There's only 2 times that I've ever been in politics, actively involved. The first one was I put my kids in the car and we ran down to the Hollywood Market and I signed the petition when we wanted to hold Mayor Coles accountable for what he'd done to the city. I wanted to be on the first page, I was on the second page, but that's okay. The second time was now, because I think that we're as critical of an issues with the city as were way back then. And what we fail to forget or fail to remember is that this city is actually ran by the residents of the city, and the council is really the checks and balances between the staff and the mayor that runs the city and the residents. And this city was built because of our residents and what we've brought to the table and how we want it to be, and I want it to continue being that. And that's why I'm running for city council, because I don't have a predetermined bias other than just being a citizen of the city, and I'd like to help with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Elaine Clegg.
Well, thanks for all staying. Gosh, this is great. I didn't know at this late at night if everyone would stay for this one, but I really appreciate you all being here. I appreciate the Neighborhood Association and Channel 6 for putting this on. These are the kinds of forums that we need when we have elections. In the other times that I've run, we've not always had them. So this is great. Many of you know who I am. I'm the current incumbent in Seat 5. I've lived in Boise my whole life. I've served on the City Council for 4 terms now. So why in the world would you want to do another one? Well, I'm an agent of change. I have been my whole life. I like to tell people I walked a petition around my high school because one of my friends wanted to be a cheerleader, and he was a boy and he couldn't be. And we got him on the cheerleading squad. I was on the committee that voted for the blue turf at Boise State. But more importantly, as I grew and aged and was raising my family, I got involved in my own neighborhood association. I worked on the Holst Gulch project. I worked on city committees. I helped write a city ordinance. And after all of that volunteer work, felt really compelled to run for city council to see what change I could make on the city council. I've done a lot over the years. There's a lot to go. I have the experience and the knowledge to lead us in this time of high growth. Thank you.
Thank you. Elaine, keep the mic hot, so we'll start with you. And Brody has a question. We have one candidate question, so we'll hit that first. This question goes to all three of you. As you have been campaigning, what would you say are the top concerns that Boiseans, the residents, have? And what is your plan to address their concerns?
Thanks, Brady. I didn't put in a question because I wanted to hear questions from you guys, but I appreciate this one because it's a really good one. As I've been door knocking and going to events and talking to people, the things that I've heard most about are the things that I think are on all of your minds: housing, growth, transportation. I hear that all the time. What are we going to do about it? The city has an initiative called Grow Our Housing that I fully support. That we're working on to put $5 million of city money into land that will buy down the cost of housing for those who are most in need. The zoning code needs updated, which will help get more housing built, but only in the appropriate places, only with the help of neighborhoods, understanding where that should be. And finally, transportation is something that I've worked on my whole life. I've been very, very involved in Valley Regional Transit and Compass. Just recently added $1 million to what the city does for Valley Regional Transit. Did it in a way that is a new way that gives VRT some comfort that that funding will be there next year, and also requires that there be a public hearing so all of you have a voice in that. It's a start toward building a regional-wide consortium of folks who understand how important transit is and bringing more funding to the table.
Thank you.
So as I've been going around and talking to everybody, really the number one issue that they have and they keep asking me about is their property taxes. And we need to really, it's the council's job, it's our fiduciary duty to balance the budget. And the city will come to you and tell you how much they want, and I understand that, and staff will, but it's your job as council for you to really look at that budget and determine what you can afford and what you maybe need to start looking at and consolidating or trying to reduce that budget so that we can reduce those property tax burdens on our residents, especially in a time where our housing values have gone up so much. That property tax is really impacting, I would say, everybody, because you have certain people and they can afford the increase in property tax and it's going to change a want that they have, but you have a huge majority of us that property tax burden is going to change a need, and we need to really be very careful about our budgeting so that we're mindful of that.
So as a first-time candidate, I knew I was going to have to do this in a more old-school way, where I go around neighborhoods, have genuine conversations with everyday Boiseans to learn more about what their concerns are. I have knocked on over 1,000 doors from West Boise along Eagle Road to South Boise to the East End, the North End, and the Bench to really better understand what it is that Boiseans are focused on, what they care about, and what they want to see going forward. And there are two things that have come up every single time, and it doesn't matter what neighborhood I'm in, and it doesn't matter who answers the door. The first thing is growth. People are concerned about growth, and it is so important right now that we go forward not just looking at growth as a city, but as a valley, and how we want to work together to make sure that we all move forward together, especially with how we're so connected in 2019, and we are only going to become more connected as we go into the future. The second thing, and again, it doesn't matter if the person that answers the door is 18 or 94, people recognize the value in bringing a new voice to the table. They recognize the value in passing that torch as we progress. Part of democracy is allowing new voices to come to the table, to continue that good work that's already been done, and to move it forward in the right direction. And so I truly believe in term limits. I do believe that 2 term limits for city council and for mayor is what our city needs. 8 years to allow an individual to come in, to be a part of the conversation, and then to pass that torch and allow the next individual to come in and to continue that work as we move forward.
Okay, Brady, keep that mic hot. We're going to start with you and go down the line. You mentioned growth, so this is a question from the audience concerning the growth in our valley. And this has to do with air quality and health. What policy steps would you take to reduce the increasing health threats from our worsening air quality?
Yeah, so I mean, absolutely a part of this is the growth that we are experiencing, right? Again, this is from here to Caldwell and everywhere in between. Part of air quality is coming from the cars that we're driving. So public transportation must be a part of our conversation. As a millennial, as a young person, I recognize that public transportation is the future. That is what we're working toward. So we've got to make sure that we are designing our city in a way that allows for this kind of growth in a responsible way, that we put density in places along major streets where someone can easily get out, get on a public transit, and head into wherever they're going. That's what the direction is that we need to go in. You know, for every apartment that's built out in Meridian or Nampa or anywhere else out there, we're only adding cars to our roads. We're not adding riders in our buses. So we've got to make sure we're thinking forward and we're thinking about how our city should look in the future.
Thank you.
He does deserve applause for that. So Salt Lake City has the same issue that we have with air quality, and for about the last 3 years, they've had a new approach to that, is they've had a fare-free bus system. They had some grant work that got them there. So in 2018, we had May in Motion with our Valley Regional Transit, and it increased bus ridership by 17%. If we could find a way to make up the difference, and the difference in our fares is only $800,000 compared to the amount that we already spend for that social service, from what Elaine was talking about with what we spend at Boise, if we can increase our bus ridership by 17% by having a fare-free bus, and your air quality would absolutely be affected by that. And it would be the probably fastest and cheapest way for us to do that. Yep.
Well, you know, good job, Brady. He's absolutely right. We've got to figure out how to do this regionally. We've got to grow this region in a way that has centers, that has density in the right places, and that has transit connecting it. We also have to have those centers be walkable and bikeable. Right now, most households take 10 car trips a day. If we could reduce that by 2 to 8 car trips a day, we'd reduce an awful lot of our air quality issue. With good centers and good transit, we could reduce it by a lot more than that. Debbie's idea about fare-free is interesting, but when you look at the context of it, I think it falls apart. And I rely on an expert in transit. His name is Jared Walker. He runs an organization called Human Transit, and he's looked at it. The places that have tried to go fare-free only end up hurting service. In this region, it would be about 1/6 of our total money that we spend on service, and it would be the money that we spend on the operating. If we do that, we'll have less service. I've worked really hard the last 8 years to add $2 million to how much the city of Boise puts into transit service. Losing half of that would mean that the 15-minute headways on State Street and Vista and Fairview and the 9:30 at night hours would go away, or at least some of them would. I don't think that's going to help ridership. To help ridership, we need more money in the system. To do that, we need local option. That's going to take that ballot initiative you guys just worked on. Let's do it in a bigger way.
Thank you. All right, we'll bring it back on, and we'll start this. Where do you stand on city efforts to ban camping on city streets, and do you support the issue going to the United States Supreme Court?
Well, thank you. This is an incredibly important issue to every city in the Ninth Circuit. If any of you have recently visited Portland or Seattle or San Francisco or Los Angeles or even Eugene, you'll see the impact of allowing camping for homeless residents. I know it sounds really compassionate to do that, but in fact, what it does is ensure, in a sense, that those homeless residents will live in squalor, will live in unsanitary conditions, and will live in unsafe conditions. We saw the impact of that with Cooper Court in this city. The city of Boise's worked incredibly hard to provide all kinds of services in lieu of camping citations. And camping citations are very rare. Last year, we only issued 17. We haven't issued one in a very long time this year. They're only issued as an infraction, like a parking ticket. They're not a criminalization. And we've just opened a homeless court, so if in fact you do get one of those tickets, you can work off the fine. We're also looking at an amnesty program. But most importantly, we don't want to end up like those other cities where the rest of you are also in unsanitary and unsafe conditions because we haven't found a way to service those who are most vulnerable. And that's what we need to work on most. Opening more housing first, like New Path and Valor Point, and our newest initiative, housing homeless families.
Thank you.
So it's a very difficult conversation to have about homeless camping. It's not a problem that's ever going to go away. It's something that we've had in Boise my entire life. It's just that we haven't had the houses built where they used to live. When they used to live down by the river, you didn't pay attention to it. When they used to live down by Quinn's Pond, you didn't pay attention to them because they were kind of behind the scenes. But we've built out those areas, and so they have nowhere to be, which leads it to our city and to the residents of the city. We need to come up with a way to help them. It's just not something that you turn a blind eye to and it's going to go away. So as a community, we need to help with that situation, and all of the things that Elaine mentioned that the city's doing is important. It's kind of an unenforceable rule to deal with homeless camping, but it's not something that you can't set those boundaries and those expectations. We set boundaries and expectations on ourselves all the time, and you can set those boundaries and expectations on what you want your city to be like and where you want people to be. But we need to also do that and be caring and to help them with a place to be. And I think Boise's doing a pretty good job of that, and the rest of the communities that are helping out with that.
Thanks. Yeah, the camping ordinance is a tricky one for me. For me, I think there's a different way to go about it, especially when months ago we had a Boise Kind initiative and we were talking about being such an inclusive community and wanting to really serve and take care of each other. I don't believe an ordinance is the best way to do that, and I don't believe taking it to the Supreme Court is the right way to go. So what I did months ago is I went and met with the director of Interfaith Sanctuary. I said, hey, you are a nonprofit, you are a wonderful person doing wonderful things. How could City Council better support you in your efforts? I think that is the approach that we need to be taking with this. You're right, we go to places like Seattle and Portland and we see what's going on in those cities, and it does concern a lot of people that we're going to become that. I don't think that has to be the case so long as we learn from what they're doing, whether it be right or wrong, and we work with the individuals here in Boise that are already doing these amazing things to serve our city, to support them in their efforts to help us move forward in the right direction.
Okay, thank you. So we'll ask you this next round here. No, you started. What can the city of Boise do to attract more businesses to town, and what kind of role, this is the important part of this question, what kind of role do you think members of the council should play in that effort?
That's a good question, yeah. You know, a while ago we had a union forum, and we talked similarly about this, about businesses coming to Boise and whatnot, and I think this ties into a lot of the conversations that we're having. We, of course, want good new businesses to be coming to Boise, right? But we also don't want people from out of state to think that they can come to Idaho simply because we have $7.25 an hour wages. We want to make sure that we are bringing jobs here that provide good wages. Part of the affordable housing crisis is making sure that people can afford to do that. Yeah, half of it is making sure they can cover their rent, but the other half is making sure that they're making a decent wage to pay their bills and to have a decent shot at a life here in Boise. So when we do talk about these companies coming here, I want to make sure that we are bringing good companies that have good paying jobs for the people of Boise, because that's what they deserve. The role that plays, I know the Boise Metro Chamber of Commerce has a pretty big role in all of this. In the role of City Council, I don't know how much they should be involved in that, but I absolutely believe that we need to recognize that Boiseans, of course, are worth more than $7.25, and that the jobs that are coming to this city should be paying more than that.
Thank you.
So I come from the service sector, and my husband owns a steel erection company with his brother. I worked at Lowe's, and as far as I know, they weren't given an incentive to come here, and they did because it's a great place to be, and they went all the way across the western part of the nation. My husband started his company without any incentives, and we're a successful second-generation debt-free company. That's important to have. As far as incentives go, I was at the Tech Summit this last week, and I was talking to him, and I don't think it's necessarily the responsibility of City Council to go and entice these companies to come here with incentives. I think that we have the state that does that, and then we also have, like he was talking about, the chamber, and we have other organizations that actively go out and look for these companies to come in. But when I was talking to the at the Tech Summit to a gentleman, we were talking about the difference between my husband not getting incentives and then major corporations getting incentives, and where that balance lies, and where it's fair and equitable. And it reminds me of when HP came here and they bought a huge company and they didn't have an incentive, but they still chose to come here, and they chose to come here because our quality of life is exceptional.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. That's a great question, and I'll start where Debbie left off. It's quality of life. What can the City Council do? We can make sure that this city remains a great place to live, and that will attract people from outside, but more importantly, it will help companies that start here grow. And we'll do that by investing in infrastructure and investing in the kinds of things that help growing companies be successful and stay in our area. I see Ray Stark back in the audience. I remember Cheryl Boyce, who used to work for the Chamber of Commerce, and the original chamber mission statement said, come join us, but be part of us. Don't expect you have to pay your fair share if you come join us, because that's what makes a great community. I believe that's still true. So having said that, specifically, what can the City Council do? The City Council can work hard, like I have been doing out at the industrial area south of town by the airport, to ensure that there is money to invest in the infrastructure. The reason we haven't had the kind of industrial growth that we might otherwise is because of that lack of infrastructure, and those are the jobs that we're missing, the jobs that Brady was talking about. Not only do we not want minimum wage jobs, we want middle-class jobs with benefits and all the things that go along with it, and that industrial park is a place to build that. I think over time we could have a very strong middle sector, something that Boise is missing, and the City Council's role in that is making sure that the conditions exist that those jobs can grow in.
Thank you. This next question, I ask you this question because we have a number of people asking the same question, worded differently, but so I feel that we need to address it again in this question, worded different, but a topic that we've already covered tonight, dealing with gun violence. What measures will you pursue to prevent and decrease gun violence and improve gun safety in our community? Elaine, you start.
As the former panel commented, the state of Idaho has some pretty strong feelings about guns. We also have pretty strong feelings about private property rights. I absolutely support the right of private property owners to declare that if they don't want guns on their private property, that guns shouldn't be there. In terms of what the city could do, I think there are actions that we could take, and I think they are along the lines of encouraging the kinds of businesses and the kinds of places where guns wouldn't be allowed. We could do that through an initiative like Boise Kind or like Think Local, where we recognize those businesses or those places that are gun-free, and make sure that the families in town who want to go to a place where they know they will be safe can go there. I think we could also make sure that when a business like the one that is right next to my office does declare a gun-free place, that we go and visit them and we spend their money there. That's what I did the day after Bacon said, hey, folks, we'd like you to leave because of your gun. And I think we as citizens can go and support that business.
Thank you.
So this is a tough question. It's one that I've had twice now and never thought that I'd have as city council. Obviously, I live in Idaho and I've had guns in my family my entire life. I, however, have never shot a weapon or held a weapon. I did work at Lowe's, and Lowe's is a gun-free corporation, and so none of us were allowed to have a gun on our person or in the car, and you're encouraged to not have a gun when you walk into a Lowe's store. However, in a state like Idaho, there's very little you can do in private property, especially when it's so open to the public like that with a person that's coming in. I don't... like what Brittany was talking about, that's a very difficult conversation to have in Idaho, and I think that you can support the businesses that do have a gun-free area if you want. You have every right to do that. We have places like all of our schools are gun-free and our university is gun-free, but it's a difficult conversation to have when you have private property rights and gun rights. I don't know how we can regulate that as a city.
Yeah, it certainly is, as everyone else has mentioned, a difficult question. I am a sixth-generation Idahoan. I grew up in a family of hunters, and I absolutely understand the rights of the Second Amendment and what that entails. With that said, when I started kindergarten was the year that the Columbine shooting happened, so I don't know a schooling without mass school shootings. That's the world that I've been raised in. So there is a balance here, right? And I think part of that balance, and a huge part of that conversation that needs to be happening, of course, all across our country, we're now seeing it all across our world, but also right here in Boise, is about mental health. Because when we talk about this kind of thing, we're talking about these mass shootings, right? And there is so much else going into that. Of course, the guns play a huge role in that, but mental health is so important. And I'm glad that it's becoming more of a conversation and people are able to talk about it and where they stand and how they feel. But we have got to continue that. We've got to push those efforts, especially with our schools and in our businesses, about mental health and the role that it plays in our community.
All right, thank you. We are getting, as they say, up against the clock. And I want to get everybody out of here by 9 o'clock. I would like to do that. That's what we tried to do from the get-go. But we have to end with this question, and we'll start it here and go right down, Brady. It has to do with the propositions. Where do you stand on Proposition 1 and 2 regarding the new library and multi-use stadium?
Yeah, this is a huge question that I also get asked a lot when I'm out door knocking. You know, when I first decided to run for city council, I knew that I needed to meet with the movers and shakers of Boise to better understand what was being done. There's a lot of good folks in our city doing a lot of really great things, whether it's elected officials, it's directors of city departments, it's directors of nonprofits. But I wanted to best understand what was going on, and a huge part of that was the library and the stadium. So I met with the individuals that were in favor of that and that were supporting that, including the director of the library. I also met with the folks that opposed that because I wanted to understand why people were supporting it and why people were opposing it. And through the 1,000 doors that I've knocked on, I've learned a few things. One, by and large, people support libraries. Libraries are a good thing. They're not just about books. They're access to information. They're a place for communities to gather. People love libraries. People want to see libraries here. A huge part of that, though, that it brings up, especially with these two specific topics, is transparency. There is so much confusion now with where the library stands, with where the stadium especially stands. People are so unsure of where they are and if they're still a thing and what they'll be voting on, that we've got to make sure we have transparency when we are talking about projects like this. At a local level, we have got to have community buy-in. To have community buy-in, you have to have people be a part of that conversation. So going forward, I'm not sure how this will turn out. I absolutely support that people have the right to vote, and they will be able to vote in November. But I think going forward, we've got to make transparency a core part of all projects going forward.
Thank you.
So this is the biggest issue, I think, why the majority of the people decided to run for city council and or mayor, is we weren't asked what we thought. And like I said earlier, is we've always been a community that has been very heavily involved as citizens in shaping our community and giving our input. And then these projects came about without anybody asking what they looked like, how much they were going to cost, and if they were going to reflect our valley. And as we are in Boise, when we get upset about something, we show you. And they did an amazing job of outreach, getting these initiatives on the ballot. There isn't a person who doesn't